All right, reading the book, Doctor Who, State of Change, continuing it. Here we go. I guess what I'll do is I'll stop camera, make it audio. Oh, what I could do, let me go back. The Doctor Who logo here. All right. So we're going to start with the theme song first. Credit to Dalek Who for this theme. The 80s theme here. I'm going to use this for my fan film as well when I eventually make it. Here we go. Do it from the phone. Here we go. Doctor Who, The Missing Adventures, State of Change by Christopher Bullis. Theme by Dalek Who, Glenn vs. Hal. Narrated by Dave Travels Through Time. Okay. We are on page 5. Captain Marcus Lucivio scowled at the veil of fog that surrounded the galley, swallowing the sun in its clammy grayness. Where had it come from so suddenly? Cold wind that seemed to blow out an air, as though an icy hand had touched him. For a moment, he had felt dizzy. Then he realized the fog was forming. Now, even as he watched, the prow faded from sight. "Backwater," he commanded. His order was echoed below deck, the easy quarter stroke he had called as the fog descended, and it was replaced by a wasp of flags digging into the water and slowing the ship. Gradually, the creak and groan of 110 oars in the rowlocks died away. At least we're well clear of the shore, Lucivio thought, as the slender Quan Cream drifted to rest, rolling gently in the slight swell. Best wait it out. Quick, come quick, they say. Where the rush and swish of air, an object passed over the ship and splashed loudly into the water. There was a confusion of shouts and a clatter of feet as the Marines grabbed their weapons and stood ready, straining for sight or sound of an enemy. "Oarsmen ready!" shouted Lucivio. But which way to stir? There was no sound now, bar the gentle slap of water along the hull. Surely they would hear any ship close enough to lose a catapult shot at them. It would be a great big craft, too, to bear a weapon capable of lofting a sizable shot like that sounded. "Captain! Captain in the water!" The excited voice came from somewhere forward, its speaker lost in the grayness. Lucivio pounded up the long deck from his command position to the stern. Solus was at the prow, leaning over the rail and pointing at somewhere bobbing in the water at the edge of visibility. Lucivio strained to make out its form. He scanned the enveloping fog again, but there was still no sign of another vessel. "Get lines and books," Lucivio ordered with a slightly forced light in his words. "Let's have a closer look at the strange prize Father Neptune has given us." Even as the crew grappled for the peculiar object, Lucivio realized the pale orange ball of the sun was slowing through the fog, brightening even as he watched. Within minutes, blue sky showed through the clearing air. The object grated against the ship's side, sparkling and glittering as the fresh sunlight caught in its intricately fashioned surfaces. Now, Lucivio was certain he had never seen anything like it in his life. The year turned, the ports of Southern Arabia, they waited. They expect to return the traders who had set sail for the west coast of India the year before, taking advantage of the favorable winds. For a month beyond their expected return, nothing was heard of, and there was talk of pirates or storms at sea. Slowly, the rumor filtered north and west to Alexandria in the Roman lands, but little attention was paid to it. They had more immediate preoccupations. There's going to be a big battle, Alexander Helios informed his sister, with the absolute certainty only an 8-year-old could command. He threw a pebble at his exquisitely fashioned model gallery. Servants stood silently around the colonnaded perimeter of the palace courtyard, keeping watch on the royal children as they played. Cleopatra Selene looked up from the pattern she was drawing in her sun tray. How do you know? She responded with inherent injured suspicion. I heard father talking to Caesarion about it. A big battle at sea between us and Octavian and his Romans, but we're going to win because the oracle told them so. Has Caesarion seen the oracle? Suppose so. That's not fair. He's our brother. Why can't we see it if he can? He's only half our brother, and he's a lot older than us, Alexander suggested. Selene was silent for a moment, contemplating the vast gulf of 7 years that separated them. Anyway, it's still not fair. Father and mother and Caesarion and all those soldiers seeing the oracle. Why not us? And metalsmiths and shipbuilders, added Alexander. What? They've seen the oracle too. They're just common. We're divine. Mother said so. How can they see it when we can't? I saw them being taken down the long hall to the special rooms. I asked Tutor if they were being taken to feed the crocodiles, and he told me. Then he looked really worried and said it was all a secret. Wouldn't say anymore. Could have ordered him. He's only a slave. Could have had him fed to the crocodiles. Could I? Of course. You can do that if you're divine. Probably have to ask Mother first. Can't we ask Mother if you can see the oracle? If we can see the oracle? She'll just say we're too young, or it was only for men to see or something. But Mother sees it. Of course, she's the queen. She can do anything. Alexander considered the implications. Is Caesarion a man now? Probably. He says we should call him Ptolemy Caesar now. I don't think he likes being called Caesarion anymore. Is he divine now? Maybe he's divine. Silly, can't be half divine. How do they know? Maybe you can. Alexander hesitated, unsure of this theological gray area. He retreated to the safer ground. But we're all divine, aren't we? Oh, yes. So one day we'll be king and queen and rule over everything. Then we'll have the oracle all to ourselves. But Caesarion, I'll be there first. I'll be there first because he's older. Well, we'll just have to take it from him, won't we? The sea was littered with the debris of battle, shattered oars, loose timbers, dead and dying men. The hulks of 24 ships were fast foundering, their upper decks ablaze. Captain Ocivio scanned the lines, counting the ships of his own special squadron. By the gods, they had all survived. A handful of craft, but they had turned the battle in their favor, and no mistake. Just the sight of them must have loosened Octavian's bows. He knew he trembled himself when they first fired up the thing, but it had worked. They had cut through the lines before they knew what were going on them, and they made so much confusion that half the enemy ships were broadside, and when half the rest of the fleet arrived, and sitting targets for ramming. Ocivio gazed fondly with not a little awe at the large, hissing, rambling boiler mounted on the deck at the plume of smoke billowing from its tall chimney, the pumping pistons that turned the twin paddle wheels. He could keep it up as long as he had fuel to burn. One of the ship's new cannons boomed from the prow, and the shot splashed amongst the retreating craft. Hold your fire until we're closer, he bellowed above the pounding of the engine. Full steam, he ordered the vowelmen. The ship, a quick-crew in name only now, surged forward, carrying Captain Marcus of Scipio, commander of the first team squadron of the Romano-Egyptian Navy, into the new future. Ptolemy Caesar, Tribunus Lactavius of the 5th Legion of the Romano-Egyptian Dominion, stood at the top of the sweeping beach and surveyed the scene before him. This was how my father must have felt when he first set foot on the shores of Britain. He thought a new land to tame, a chance to shape destiny. I will be worthy of your name, father, I will, but allow me a little time to make my mark. Remember, you do not have to follow in the footsteps of such a legend. After all, I'm not yet 24. The landing north of the mouths of the Indus had been made without opposition. The veterans of the Battle of Rhodes and the siege of Tarentum were able to disembark their landing craft without even wetting their boots. Out to sea, the expedition's larger ships mostly converted merchantmen with rigging still bristling about their funnels, keeping their cannons trained suspiciously in. Men assembled by ranks on the beach, sunlight glitching off the bayonets of their long rifles. Soon the muddy sand was churned and rutted by feet and hooves and long scarves of gun carriage tracks. Ptolemy turned his gaze inland towards the south, fertile valley of the great river. The area was more or less than the reports he had seen and that it led him to expect, especially in trees. That was good. Timber was required not only for the construction of the legion's base, but also for the hungry boilers of their ships. Back in Rome, Marcus Antonius had recently directed the seeding of lands. Fire not only helped form the new weapons of the Dominion, it propelled the fleet to carry them. Fire was power and must not fail for want of fuel. On the second evening after the landing, the staff commanders filed out of the legate's tents being delivered the reports. He called the Ptolemy to wait forward. Aulus Severus Glabrio, senatorial legate, commanding the 5th Legion, was small and wiry, just past 40, with gray-shot hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He contemplated the lean young man with the strong nose and high forehead who stood before him with, it seemed, an easy interest. "Sit down, Tribune." Ptolemy sat alert and respectful. There was a moment's awkward silence. Then Glabrio blurted out his own disgust. "By Hades, I hardly know how to address you properly." "Tribune would seem sufficient, sir," remarked Ptolemy. "Then tell me, Tribune." Kind of Glabrio with some feeling just as it was going down here. "Filling my position as your second in command, sir, to the best of my ability." Yes, you've done all that's been required of you, even though you must have realized I've had little to do with you as possible. While on board ship, there is slight opportunity for private conversation, and anyway, I'm no sailor. The best thing that can be said for these infernal new engines is that they reduce the time at sea. Ptolemy commented straight-faced, "If the truth be known, I'm no lover of the sea either." For a moment, the men stood solemnly at each other, then joined in mutual laughter. Glabrio got up and moved up to a small chest in the corner, from which he produced a finely wrought decanter and 2 goblets. "That is 2 questions," replied Ptolemy. "I will explain why I wish to be here for a while, but to my status, that is simple. You know what experience I have of war, sir. Do you think I'm ready for such a command?" "Ah, I see now, I think. No, you need a few more years yet before you're ready." Glabrio's face darkened. "You need to feel the twisting of your guts before the battle, but learn not to sow it. To smell the fear of your troops and know how to rally their spirits. Those are a few instances, but words do not do them justice. You have to be there to learn such things." "Just so," smiled Ptolemy. "Well, may the gods grant you good fortune. It's the hard road, but the only one for the way you're going. But this is the Dominion. Needs strong men to rule it now. The Civil War is past. If you've half the quality your father has had, then you'll last the chance." "Thank you, sir. You could give me no better praise or encouragement than that." "You'll pardon the thought now. Probably seated, but I feared you would like those young equestrian pups they give me for tribunes. There should be limits to what money and influence can buy, but perhaps some of them are your friends." "Acquaintances at best. You would not have thought well of me if I'd used my influence to bring mere friends along, however well I thought of them. But to be fair, I think Patonus and Agricola have the makings of sound men. Perhaps we shall see. But now we are getting off the track. You said there was a second part in answer to my question. Why do you wish to be here of all places?" "Because the Dominion is ready to expand its frontiers, and also because there is an intriguing mystery to be unraveled." "Tell me, what do you know of the mystery of this land in recent years?" "Well, only the rumors, of course. Something happened here during the wars of the Triumvirs. A great famine wiped the land clean, perhaps. Those who made their way into Persia or across to southern Arabia, bringing strong stories of them. There's also talks of an earthquake that closed the passes through the mountains of the north. I know there has been no silk or jade from the east for many years, so something must have occurred to interfere with the trade. But if it was famine, then I see no sight of it here. The country certainly seemed fertile enough. I suppose it may have recovered it over the years, though. I only hope the stories about a plague are not true. My soldiers will face anything they can see to fight." but invisible sickness, he looked grave. I wondered about that with Alexander's port not far along the coast, similarly deserted and yet being ordered not to occupy. There is no plague, Ptolemy said Fern. From all the reports that I've read, I made a special study of such things. No plague causes the land to be empty. But there are strange traces in Alexander's port that I wanted to undisturbed until I could examine them personally. You see, I've been using my influence to arrange matters, but not to satisfy mere personal curiosity. You can't be sure. Sooner or later, we would have come here. When we do in greater numbers, I wish us to be prepared. If there's anything strange about this land, any possible danger to the Dominion, there must be identified. But as you said, there have been rumors. In some places, tales of what happened here have led to panic. That must not be allowed to spread, which is why the details of this mission have not been made public. Barrio's nodding. Yes, that makes sense. We are the scouts, and there is always some danger in that. Very well. What are your orders? No orders. You are command of the Legion Severus Glabro by virtue of hard-won experience, which is yet I cannot equal. I rely on you to continue to fill that post to the best of your ability for the glory of Rome and the Dominion. There was past an indomitable authority in his words that demanded attention. Yes, thought Corborio, your father does live on in you, and in no less your mother. But, Ptolemy continued, I do have a request. You have only to name it. When the capital is secure, I wish to visit Alexander's port to find what I may. And then I shall take a cohort up the Indus on landing craft to explore as possible in the interior. Then, well, that depends. Take the first cohort, twice the number of men in the best centurions. Remember when your father wrote about your worth. Well, you have Marius Rufus as the most senior, and he would have approved of him most thoroughly. Thank you, sir. We shall discuss the details further tomorrow. Meanwhile, I think we should take our rest early. Clearly, there's much to be done. Ptolemy saluted, and it was turning to go when Glaburius said, I met your father once, when I was young. Bright interest lighted up Ptolemy's face. Truly, sir, I'd be most grateful to hear anything of my father. We shall talk of him and many other things. I hope when the business of the Dominion allows, but I will say this in tribune, Ptolemy Caesar, I think he would recognize a worthy son. 6 landing craft steamed in line astern up the broad, slow river, trailing wakes of churned water behind them from their new screw propellers. Beyond the reeds, an occasional drooping palm along the water's edge could see thickness of bamboo and breaks of mature trees. Ptolemy stood at the prow of the lead ship that carried the first century. Behind him, mounted in blocks, the Legion pennant fluttered on the end of its staff, together with the wolf insignia of the cohort and the spear bearing the old mandible railing standards of the open palm. And then came the slap of flesh against flesh. Tribune Lucius Salvius, this new land of yours must be lacking in larger game and human inhabitants. But I can testify there is no shortage of stinging insects from personal experience. Does it ever get any core here? I hope up in the mountains, I believe it could be pleasantly temperature. Oh, and how far away are they? About 10 days at least, but I expect we shall be making several stops on the way as we come across any settlements. So I better be off to find more ointments for those cursed bites, because there will be more to follow shortly. Agricola concluded resignedly, slapping another insect. I shall return from this trip looking positively pockmarked. I know it. And as I'll say to my parents, that is what comes of trying to make a man of me. I was quite happy as I am, and now look, a face no decent woman will share the same house with. He stared off in search of medicine. I have a theory that the people here simply left to escape those wretched insects. Ptolemy watched him leave with a smile. Agricola's complaints and American delicacy were quite superficially discovered. Fundamentally, he was a cheerful companion whose manner concealed a stubborn streak of determination that would sustain him beyond the point where others might yield. At least that was his judgment. Time would tell if it was a true one. First Centurion Rufinus approached. All audience rigged as ordered, sir. Rufinus was a burly, grizzled man with a prominent scar across his right cheek. Well done. I want no one suffering from too much sun at this stage. Let the men build up a tolerance gradually and make sure they wash down in river water as often as they need. But for Jupiter's sake, don't let it be mixed with our drinking water. We'll replenish that from somewhere faster flowing. Understood, sir. How is the fuel holding up? Should last us through tomorrow. Ruffinus scratched his chin with a rasp swim. Well, so that would depend on what it would be. I've seen a few spots already that would make a nice bit of farmland. Those I would do with it being a touch cooler. He patted the heavy revolver in its holster, slung across his gladius. I reckon we have the edge on anything we'd like to come across. Thanks be to the gods for sending the oracle. He paused and lowered his voice almost reverently. You pardon for asking, sir, but the oracle, is it a wonderful thing to behold, as they say? Ruffinus, it is undoubtedly the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. As soon as the next day, they came across a deserted village on the river bank. While details were sent to cut crosswood, Ptolemy took Agricola to examine the buildings more closely. Ptolemy was shocked into wakefulness by the first horrified cry of her arm ringing out in the darkness. Boom, 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 boom. Throwing off his blanket, he scrambled to his feet, pistol in hand. The ship had been moored that night in the center of the river in box formation. Now, from the strip of water between the two roads, there came a furious thrashing and plunging and wash of spray rising over the cries of the sentries. Jupiter, save us! What is it? Exclaimed Agricola, struggling out of his own cover, stammered and said, I don't know, follow me! They sprinted along the long deck, dodging the milling groups of freshly roused soldiers who were grabbing at the rifles and lining the rails. There came the flashes and reports of more shots as they reached the stern, and the black water's indistinct forms writhed and twisted. Waves slapped the side of the lander, making it blob and sway. All ships, light your lanterns. See what you're shooting at. One by one, the big ship's lanterns that hung over stern and prow were kindled from the small hand lamps. Torches of pitch-soaked reeds were lit and held aloft. Yellow light blossomed over the churning waters, blotting stars from the sky. The soldiers stared aghast at what is revealed, tangled in a mooring light. Rearing high over the confusion, snapping the sun rings of light that surrounded them were two huge snake-like heads whipping to and fro of a massive scaled and ridged back, resembling to crocodiles, whilst the long tail, like they have a smooth lizard, beat down with a smack on the water. Then the crocodile body twists on side, revealing a pale underbelly and powerful clawed and webbed legs, then tore at the rope, which cut into its flesh. There were 3 pairs of legs on its body. Suddenly, Ptolemy realized what he was seeing. It was one creature, a chimera, with 2 snake heads, a grotesquely extended crocodile body, and 1 long snake tail. Hercules Bane! Hercules Bane, a hydra! Exclaimed Agricola, his voice cracking in fear. Even as he spoke, the long entangling the creature snapped, and the thing surged towards them, its twin heads rising head high over the ship's rails. Slotted eyes gleamed madly, forked tongues flickered in the gasping mouths, which bore not only the fangs of snakes, but also rows of cruel spiked teeth. A soldier just charged his rifle full into one head, then screamed in pain as its twin whipped forward and closed its jaws over his shoulder, lifting him, kicking convulsively clear of the deck. The air filled with acrid gun smoke lit by orange spikes of flame, and the company poured shot after shot into the creature. Strips of flesh were torn from its neck, splattering dark blood over the seething waters. Other bullets ricocheted off the heavy scales of its body. The creature plunged about wildly, trying to find escape from the circle of pain and confusion. Then Ptolemy found Ruffinus by his side, grenade in his hand, the fuse of which was spluttering down almost to the casing. There was a sharp concussion and a fountain of spray. When the scene cleared, the creature was twisting feebly in the water, the head carrying the shoulder, lolled motionless, his body drifting clear of its grasp. The great limbs gave a final kick and were still. With a score of weapons still trained on the creature, men dived into the water to recover their comrade. Carefully, his body was lifted back on board. Ashen-faced Agricola turned to Ptolemy. What the hell is there that breeds such creatures? Ptolemy's face was set and unreadable, betraying nothing of his feelings. I do not know, he replied evenly, but we will seek of it out if we must and tame it. Don't worry, Ptolemy assured him. It died. It is only flesh and blood. Ptolemy turned away to order new watches to be kept. Agricola's eyes followed him, but there was only flesh and blood. The next morning, the dead soldier was buried. Little fleet continued on up the river. Gradually, the nature of the land began to change. It was only over a year before Ptolemy Caesar returned to Alexandria and from there to Rome, but he returned a changed man, burdened with the memory of an experience beyond understanding. Deimos scrambled amid the paper scraps and half-rolled scrolls, overflowing the large table that dominated the center of its cluttered workroom. Where was it? Where was it? Finally unearthed a strip of paper beaming a list of figures. Then he ran to a celestial map pinned to the wall, displaying a rather over-decorated panorama of the heavens, in which the symbol of the zodiac had more prominence than the relative positions of the stars. He studied it for several minutes against the figures on the table. Then his thin shoulder sagged. So it was true. For a long time, he stood rooted to the spot, then carelessly tossed the wax tablet into the table, where it knocked over an inkwell, the contents of which started to soak rapidly through the litter of documents. He did nothing to stop it. After all, nothing really mattered now, did it? Despair almost threatened to overwhelm him. Then he made an effort to straighten up and regain his composure. Panic would not get him anywhere. He brushed back what remained of strangling hair and tried to think of his clear and dignified manner. By application of the principles he had studied, he would deduce the best course of action to take. For some moments, he stood with his eyes closed, mumbling under his breath as he turned over the relevant factors. Then he blinked suddenly. Yes, that's it. An entirely illogical and reasonable response to the situation that confused him. Purposely, he took his sun hat off the peg and placed it firmly on his head. So preoccupied with his thoughts was that he almost collided with the gang of slaves who were in the process of anchoring a long wooden pole into a freshly dug hole in the narrow pavement. By all the gods, what are you putting this here for? Thermos spluttered indignantly. It's blocking the path. Take it away at once. The work foreman interposed himself between Thermos and the laborers. He assessed Thermos' dress and accents and from, all right, Greek, keep it down now. This is permitted construction, you know. Thermos threw himself up as his height allowed. I, sir, am a citizen of Rome and the Dominion, and I demand free and unobstructed passage down my street. What is this monstrosity? Don't you read the notices, citizen? This is for carrying the new wired lightning along a couple of streets. They've got some decent houses there who are having it put in, and the company have got permission to run the lines through here. So let's have no more of your complaints. To the foreman's surprise, Thermos started to laugh in an unsettling, slightly hysterical manner. Right. Kept repeating beyond Gothels. Oh, there'll be plenty of that soon enough. Then they won't need your wires and poles. He stopped abruptly and fixed the confused man with bulging eyes that had a distinctly manic gleam in their eyes. Or else there'll be no light at all, he announced dramatically. What will you do then, eh? Run your wires over the whole world to light it? And he tottered off, intermittently laughing and muttering in the direction of the nearest tabernae, where he proceeded to get systematically drunk. The ear-splitting clatter of Strabo's compressed air chisel reverberated around the narrow, steeply angled shaft that had been painstakingly cut and braced through the strata of earth and rubble. Beside the bulky form of Strabo, Decius levered a new wooden beam into place, while Tyro shoveled the excavated material into a wicker hod, ready for sliding down the shaft by means of a rope pulley. Dust hung in the air, turning a hazy yellow in the glow of the wire light work lamp. The lamp blinked 3 times, and the men gratefully stopped work at the signal. There was a small level chamber at the bottom of the shaft, just large enough to allow Strabo to stand upright. Here, the excavated earth was transferred to one of the trolleys running along a set of wooden rails that disappeared down a horizontal tunnel, which also carried the powering compressed air cables. The 3 men crouched down on the tiny railway cars and pulled themselves along by their hands for almost 100 yards. The other end of the tunnel emerged into the excavated cellar of what had been a modest townhouse. Now it more closely resembled a miner's camp. The smoke from the engine was gathered in an improvised flue pipe, which ran away to the upper area. The chamber also contained Cassodorus, who solicitously offered mugs of water, which they downed thirstily. Well done, lads, Cassodorus said encouragingly. Just another few cubits and we're there. Cassodorus was known as Cassodorus the Rat due to his undoubtedly resemblance to that hardy rodent. It was especially noticeable when he smiled as he did now. He had the appropriate teeth. All he lacked apparently were the whiskers. You've been saying that for the last 5 days, exclaimed Decimus. His regular work required a certain lightness of touch. He was anxious not only to develop blisters. Months we've been at this, and I don't think you've had any idea how far they left to go. Tyro opened him a new line of descent. What about equal time up the shaft? Don't you see up there very often? Do you like to keep cozy out here during the light work? Who would be the first to turn in the rest so he could save his own skin? Continued Decimus. Anyway, there's only one to have out, so where should we be escaping to? All the more reason to get the shaft finished then, isn't it? Cassandra pointed out. They continued before the rest had a chance to think. After all, who set all this up? Who is planning the greatest robbery the city has ever seen, and out of the goodness of his heart has offered a percentage? Equal shares, muttered Strabo. Same thing. Better be. While we're about it, who's paid for most of the tools? Well, his purses anyway, and when who sold the engine? I did. All right, exclaimed Cassodorus, waving his hands in a placating gesture. Who found this house and who drew up the plan? He pulled the familiar grubby, much-folded sheet of parchment from the inner recesses of his tunic. Some of these were actually necessary. The rest he had added for effect. Cassandra's tone became hushed as though awed by his own words. That's it. Feast your eyes, lads. That's the path to riches marked out there. Riches beyond your wildest dreams. You can retire on this and live in a palace as big as Alexander's. No more thriving and dodging the water and living in stinking rooms and thinking any moment it'll be the knife in the ribs and a quick trip to the bottom of the Tiber. There was a thoughtful silence filled by imaginations, briefly unchained. Well, put like that seemed foolish to complain a little bit about digging. It was very dark. The slow, booming voice seemed to be talking to itself. Sky turns, sun goes down, stars come down, turn slowly, moon dries, no quarter-sized clouds come from the west. Winds blow and rice, and rain falls, stars fade, new days, sun rises. Yes, I know, replied the cool commanding voice sharply. That was not my fault. That was your clumsiness. Do that again and I'll leave you alone forever. Do you understand? No, leave me. Not if you obey. Now show me what you have done. Have you read anything else? No, told you can only read once. But keep him busy. Look out. Let me show you. After they had bathed and dressed the queen, her slaves tended to her makeup. White base was applied to her face and arms to keep them attractively pale. When they were done, Cleopatra Selene dismissed them and stood alone before the big full-length mirror in her dressing room. She always did this before an important social or political meeting. One used whatever tools were necessary to achieve a purpose. Physical appearance was one of those tools which was effective against men in particular. Had not her mother proved this at least twice, she smiled to herself. The delight was that, try as they might, beauty almost always blind them to what they lay underneath. Intelligence, beauty, and power, all three could coexist together. She was proof of that. So Cleopatra Selene, child of the gods, queen of the Nile, ruler of the eastern realm of the Dominion, examined her reflection critically as a good worksman might be. Tool she was about to employ. Crowning everything was an intricately beaded vulture headdress. She thought through with gold thread. Below that she wore a long, tight-fitted dress of finest, almost translucent linen, belted with a golden shaft. Jewelry in the form of finely wrought bracelets, anklets, and rings completed the ensemble. Yes, she's turning to one side and the other. The effect was suitable for a particular guest. She would have modified her costume slightly in the Greek style to remind them of her dynasty's links with Alexander the Great. Had they been from Rome, she would have worn a dress cut and trimmed in that style. She was known as freely as queen only by the Eastern realm, as had her mother before her. It had perhaps been her parents' hardest but wisest decision not to force their claims to divine power on Rome. In its way, the mirror before her was symbolic of impending change, thought Selene. It had been made using knowledge of the drawing and silvering of sheer glass, sea glass, revealed to them by the oracle. She paused, frowning, then leaned forward curiously, examining the ornate frame of the mirror. There was something slightly different about it, which she could not quite name. She touched the frame and became aware of the faintest of tingling sensations. Cleopatra Selene had time for only the briefest yelp of shocked horror before she was pulled through the face of the mirror and vanished from the room. For a moment, the mirror shimmered like a pool of quicksilver, then it became still once more. The water droplet gathered speed again and splashed into the collar of the doctor's coat, which Perry held wrapped about her. The time rotor shuddered into life once more. Console lights flickered dimly. The other adjusts to compensate, cooed the doctor's voice, returning to its usual tone. A dull, solid thump reverberated through the TARDIS like the distant sound of a lead slab hitting the ground they had landed. Perry blinked and looked about her in puzzlement. Superficially, it seemed as though the power had flicked off for a second or two, then come on again. But somewhere deep inside, his sixth sense was insistent the moment had actually lasted for years. She shook her head gingerly, hoping that everything would make sense again, and reminded herself that if she had wanted an ordinary life, she wouldn't be here. Ah, good, said the doctor, as though everything was perfectly normal. He stood up and went over to the console. Perry struggled upright within the enveloping folds of his burrowed coat and followed him. The doctor circled the console, studying the controls and cautiously adjusting settings. After a minute, Perry commented brightly, "I'm glad we've got some light in here, doctors. Does this mean the rest of the power will be back online soon?" "Unfortunately not. This is just the last of the residual force field energy that had been reabsorbed into the system," the doctor replied, still circling bustily. "So what about the link with the Eye of Harmony?" "That's still broken. Can't you fix it?" "Oddly enough," the doctor responded with heavy sarcasm, "that is what I am trying to do." He stood back from the controls and scratched his head for a moment, looking frankly perplexed. "However, the beam is not there to be locked onto." "I thought you said it could be picked up anywhere in time and space." "It can. So either this is somewhere inside the normal continuum, or else the beam is being blocked. I'm detecting some peculiar faint energy readings. Both at the low power, the receptor sensitivity is not what I would wish. So I can't take a detailed analysis." His brow furrowed in deep thought once more. "Things don't work too good without the beam, do they, Doctor?" Perry commented, disturbing his reverie. "Ah, no. The link to the Eye of Harmony was a Time Lord discovery that made widespread time travel safe and controllable. It supplies not only power, but the equivalent of a fixed reference point, both physically and temporally for calibration purposes. It allows the TARDIS to determine its location with tremendous precision." "But have you any idea to where we are now? I mean, we have landed somewhere, haven't we?" "Yes, we have definitely landed somewhere." "Well, don't keep it a state secret, Doctor." The doctor looked annoyed, unwilling to admit he was unsure of the facts. "Line for the interference with the systems we sustained at the low power, the navigation readings do indicate that we almost completed our planned journey." "How do you mean?" "We are in Rome, but only in the year 10 BC, approximately." "Well, at least that's somewhere, Doctor." "Yes, but that doesn't explain why I can't detect the Eye of Harmony link, or the origin of the trace energy field. Something is definitely wrong here," he concluded. Perry smiled wryly and shrugged as expressively as she could within the bulky coat. "So what's new? I should have known better than expect 2 trips in a row to work out, okay?" She appeared to have recovered her resolve. "Okay, let's go take a look, see? It'll be nice to get in the light again." "I'm afraid there is no light outside," replied the doctor. "We appear to have materialized inside an enclosed space, some sort of building, I assume. For the moment, however, it seems to be deserted." "We're going to need some flashlights then," she peered around the gloomy interior. "Could we do with some more light?" And then we're here while we're about it. "The energy lamps are behind the third rondo up on the left of the column beside the sea chest." Doctor informed her, absently returning the examination of the control console. "Say, Doctor, I wish you'd have told me where these were earlier. Hey, what's this?" Among the clutter, Perry discovered a box containing what appeared to be a dozen fish-sized blobs of cloud plastic jelly, which were soft and malleable to the touch. The doctor glanced over briefly. "Oh, yes, synthetic bioluminescence. Could mold one in your hand for a minute." Well, experimentation revealed that they could be shaped like a modeling clay, and she quickly made a glowing circlet to wear on her head. She just laughed. "See, Doctor, very practical. Needs no hands, but these would be make great kids' toys as well." "Well, they are children's toys, about 30 years on from your time. Now, if you've finished playing, we'll see what is outside, shall we?" "Wait for me. I've got to find some clothes." "Do please try to get your coat wet," the doctor called plaintively after her. "Doctor, anything that could happen to this coat can only be improvement." She was carrying the doctor's coat with elaborate care to keep care of any splashes. When they were wide enough, she handed him his coat and a torch. The doctor squeezed between the doors and Perry followed close behind. The air outside was cool and still and slightly musty. It was tightly silent except for the sound of their own movements. Perry shivered, feeling as though the presence was resented in some way. The dancing circle of torch beam revealed flashes of color. A broad frieze was painted on the walls between knee and head height, comprised of figure groups in Roman and Egyptian dress set in various tableaux. In the middle of one of the chamber's long walls was a massive double door, but without any sign of the handle. Was that the only door, she wondered, swinging her door around? Yike! Her involuntary exclamation of surprise echoed around the chamber. At her yell, the doctor's torch had also turned to illuminate the motionless figure. What beautiful workmanship, he observed with an infuriating composure. Gee, Doctor, how was I supposed to know it was a statue? It looks so real. That's the atmosphere in here. This place is as spooky as a tomb. Perhaps that is because it is a tomb. Huh? At least the antechamber of a tomb. This appears to be the record of the lives and triumphs of its occupant. Oh, and who's that? Apparently Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile. Hey, Cleopatra's old tomb? And there are representations of the lady herself, said the doctor, indicating the twin statues symbolically guarding the entrance to the inner chambers and her own last resting place. They were beautifully carved and black lacquered, with the costume and headdress being cooked up in guile. Tied between the large handles of each door was a heavily twisted rope fused into place with wax and clay seals. Some place for us to land, Perry shivered slightly. Isn't it? But I don't know Cleopatra was buried in a room. Well, she wasn't, the doctor replied. Some of these more recent things never happened in my past, did they, Doctor? She said hesitantly. No, they didn't. Look at the dates of these events. They've got some decimal numerals as well as Roman. That's not right. What does AUC mean? Roman dating from the foundation of the city in your terms. The traditional date of the foundation of Rome was 753 BC. Hey, what's this big battle in 31 BC? Are those meant to be steamships? Unfortunately, I think they are. 31 BC seems familiar. The decisive siege battle of Actinium. The forces of Antony and Cleopatra lost. By the next year, they were both dead, and Octavian was on his way to become Emperor Augustus. Not here, though, Perry queried on. Look, at 725 AUC, the 29 BC, they seem to have changed the calendar. So they have, from the doctor, Dominion Year 1, it says. Here's Anthony's funeral guest in 13 DY. And there it ends. Doctor, just where are we? First long rays of morning sunlight spread above the broad plain of sand and rock that lay to the southwest of Alexandria. Teams of loincloth-clad workers appeared, shivering in the chill air, marching in files from the dormitory compound set on the edge of the plain. There within an inner sanctum, the priest would perform mysterious rites. No, who's calling? Give me 1 second. Back to the story. 13 was marched to the largest of the great hangars that dominated the center of the plain. Anxiously, the overseer checked the wind, but the morning air was almost still, with only the lightest of seaweed breezes. The men emerged, pulling on lines hanging from above, slowly, majestically, the pale 750-meter length of the airship. Carefully, the weightless mass of the 180-ton craft was walked over to its mooring tower and secured by its nose mount. Then the final preparations were begun for the horse to receive its final passenger. The morning sun was still touching the lotus bud capitals of the throne room columns. At length, the audience was contemplated. One by one, the men bowed their way out of her presence. But the queen signaled to Chief Minister Xanxes that he should remain behind. Wait with me, Xanxes. I wish to speak in private. The garden door was closed behind them. Is already, inquired the queen. Yes, your majesty. The carriers and service fleet report all is well. They await only your orders to sail should they be necessary. Cleopatra Selene faced him squarely, her dark eyes sharp and probing. Xanthes found it hard to meet her gaze, thinking she had become even more imperious of late. You do not approve of the course I have chosen, she said. It was a statement, not a question. It's not for me to approve or disapprove, Majesty. Simply to carry out your wishes to the best of my ability. However, ask for counsel on that matter. I would advise that every effort be made to avoid war. The Dominion cannot afford to be torn apart by civil strife, as was the Republic before it. Out of which strife my parents won through to supreme power, Cleopatra Selene reminded him. Failure! Cleopatra Selene's eyes burned. There is no chance of that, though you are correct in fearing division. Xanthes, you do not seem to realize that the Dominion is already divided between Alexander, Ptolemy, and myself. That is not natural or desirable. If we three were of equal capabilities, then perhaps some compromise might be found. But that is hardly the case. My brother is not competent. My half-brother has lost his nerve. Your trouble, Xanthes, is that you have no ambition left in you. Yeoman bowed and head, leaning heavily on his staff of office for the first time. No, Your Majesty. I think perhaps I'm simply tired. Maybe selfishly I'd hoped to spend my last years at peace. I never had any doubts of your abilities, Majesty. Beyond the gate was a flight of steps leading up to a sweep of columnated walkways surrounding a low-walled enclosure. How is the work on the new wireless transmitting device progressing? She asked, seeming to turn to a new matter. Xanthes looked relieved. They were going well. And how far have they been able to send signals? I'm not sure exactly, Majesty. I will inquire. In general, then, can you reach Athens yet, or Carthage, or Rome? I did it to save the Dominion, Majesty. You must believe that. So Alexander knows all my plans. Yes, everything up to the directions I made yesterday. By the time guards arrived in response to the cry, it was all over. This is the most inauspicious event. Indeed, it may be an omen from the gods. I must seek the advice of Carmen at once. Thank you for your concern, Fabio, she said warmly. I always knew when I made counting you, there's another service I require. Anything, Majesty. There must be a sign that I should not travel today, but other factors may require that I depart as planned. I want you personally to go to the airfield and see that my ship is ready for flight and that all possible precautions have been taken to ensure a safe journey. Do you understand? Perfectly, Majesty. His toilet was simply performed by splashing cold water from a basin over his hands and face and combing his hair. Water was now rendered purely decorative by the approved piped water running directly to the kitchens. The message was brief and superficially trivial, but its true significance did not exceed me. He cast the letter aside, so they wanted his declaration of support today. But they must know he would never get it, so what then? Dark times either way. But he did not care anymore. Went over to a small alcove, sent one wall of a study. It held the Larium, the chapel for gods of the household. Close by a miniature temple portico were images of Vesta, goddess of the heart, and Janus watched at the door. Between them was the Egyptian bull god Seriphus, his family deity. Above it was the symbol of the oracle. Hung above the shrine, as did in many Roman homes, were three other things also deified in some eyes. They showed his father, mother, and Marcus Antonius. Quaramid, chief priest of Seriphus, greeted Cleopatra. Great loss to this earthly plane of mud and decay, Majesty, but Xanthes' spirit self soon depart upon his journey to eternal life as companion to the gods. It was necessary, Majesty. Destiny could not be denied. Small dark eyes gave no indication of regret. Of course it was necessary, agreed Cleopatra. It would not have ruined everything with his talk of compromise. She was still holding Xanthes' staff of office. Now she handed it to Quarman. You understand how to use this? Smiled in cold satisfaction. Not good. Now what are the carriers in the service fleet? I'm certain Xanthes never learned you had personally ordered the service fleet to sail 3 days ago. All reports of this were relayed through my office and false reports sent out to Xanthes' administration. Of course, Majesty has been foretold by all the signs when our hearts are weighted after death, as the Book of the Dead tells. We must be able to say this thing was done. The oracle must be returned forever to its proper resting place. For just a moment, a curious, knowing smile flashed across Cleopatra's lips. Carmen, she said sincerely, you can have no idea how strongly I also wish to see the oracle in its proper place. Dictator, your pardon for disturbing you, Dictator Alexander. There was no response. Prefect Marcus Vitellius looked around at him at the palace bedchamber with carefully concealed displeasure. It was first the same style which borrowed much from the Persian and Egyptian. Vitellius cleared his throat again a little louder and repeated himself, directing his words more forcefully at the large canopy and veiled bed. This time there came a muffled grunt which he took to be an invitation to approach closer. The second hauled itself up from under the sheets and shoulders of a young man with curled and tousled hair. He blinked blurrily at Vitellius in vague annoyance. "Why are you disturbing me at this hour, Vitellius?" He covered his eyes through pain. "Curse the light who opened these curtains. Don't you know how it feels like Vulcan has set up his forge inside my head?" Silently, Vitellius poured water from the jug on his side table. He drank gleefully, and a little color returned to his face. He focused on Vitellius with red-rimmed eyes. "Second passed on, Dictator," Vitellius invited blandly. "Why is that hard any time at all? Why is it so important that you disturb my rest?" "You did ask me to inform you last night." "Well, out with it then." "An affair of state, Dictator. We are not alone." "Hey, oh yes." Alexander reached out and slapped the swelling curve of the bedclothes. "Anyway, with you, girl, we wish to speak in private." A beautifully dusky Nemodian woman with a mass of raven black curling hair rolled at the other side of the bed. With slow deliberation, she wrapped a sheet about her. "Do you disapprove, Vitellius? She really is most skilled. I'd recommend you to try her, but I'm keeping her for myself," she chuckled. "I do not disapprove of her in particular, Dictator. Her charms are self-evident, but one of your persistent of your age, I know, take a respectable life, because the people is expected. Why, my illustrious namesake of old had concubines by the score, and they called him the Great. Do they not realize I'm not bound by the limitations imposed on ordinary men? Soon, Dictator, soon. When the signs are right." Communication received last night from Xanthes, Dictator. "Yes, I see. This is good, Vitellius. We've no need to recall any legions from the provisions. For the moment, the Xanthes must still be keeping her in check. Well, all preparations can proceed at normal for reception. And the matter of Ptolemy Caesar, Dictator? Ah, yes, dear Caesarion, they must be resolved soon, one way or another. Ring the bell for my attendance." "Of course we know Selena's been plotting against me, has she not, Vitellius?" "Regretfully, she has, Dictator." "Hardly something that can be expected to pardon." "No, Dictator." "Trusted Fabio, you've done much to reassure me," she returned to pause for thoughts. "In fact, I think I'll take you with me, then I'll have nothing to fear, will I?" Fabio's jaw dropped, and he purred his way on his feet. "Me, Majesty, but I have duties." "First duty is to me, Fabio, is not?" "Of course, Majesty." "So you're not afraid of flight? I've heard even the bravest men are afflicted by such fears." "No, Majesty." "Then come along, we must go get under way." The double doors leading to the next section of the tomb swung open, with an appropriate deep and glorious creaking groan. "Hurry, let's they hadn't done that," Perry commented nervously. Images from any number of horror films kept popping into her thoughts and reminded her of the traditional fate reserved for tomb robbers. The doctor sighed. "I trust you are not going to continue to jump at every shadow." "Okay, Doctor, don't rub it in." The doors rubbed into a broad flight of stairs leading up into the darkness. Perry swung her torch above the interior of the new chamber. "Whoa, jackpot!" In every atom of her torch being touched, Perry seemed to see the flickering of gold. Statues, figurines, gilded pots and jars, decorated caskets, and chests of all sizes. Some of the furniture incorporates stylized animal heads embodied in their frameworks or as decorations. The doctor kept saying that everything was right. The TARDIS certainly proved it, but it did not make her surroundings any less wonderful to know that, metaphorically speaking, the paint was still wet around the edges. She looked about her again, noting the second aisle winding between the stacks of treasure. "Hey, Doctor, there's none of those fancy doors here with the rope seals and so on. Wonder where it goes to." "Probably on the sarcophagus chamber itself, I would think." "Oh, look. Well, we'll leave it at that then. Look at this." It was an exquisitely detailed model of Cleopatra's royal barge. But the model with striking differences. "Guess there's no doubt about it. We have definitely slipped sideways in time into one of those parallel worlds you told me about." The doctor's face was contorting an intense scowl of concentrated thought. "It would seem so, and yes. Yet I'm not certain." "Ah, come on, Doctor. What else can be?" "There should have been some indication on the console ratings." "After the way they've been knocked about and with the low power and all?"
Perhaps. I suppose we shall simply have to explore beyond this tomb. Discover what lies outside. The good old empirical method? Well, we saw assume in his room, but which version of Rome will it be if we have truly entered a parallel timeline? Let's get out there and find out, huh? Suspense kill me. She turned towards the corridors they had come through. No, not that way. Look at the roof. What are those, ventilations? That would perform that function when the tomb was being built, certainly. But there seems some more mystic purposes, such as allowing the spirit of the deceased an easy path to heaven. Remember that molecular structure? I can use that to widen the aperture. But the stats, there must be at least 5 or 6 guards. So that's a lot of rock, Doctor, and the quarter doesn't cut all that deep at once, does it? Why can't we just go through the antechamber door? It would manage that easy. Considering this tomb is relatively new, they might be guarded or perhaps even open into a secondary chamber and temple in current use. Okay, Doctor, you've told me, but still going to mean a lot of digging. The doctor beamed me like an overgrown schoolboy with a cigarette. Probably not. Everything we have seen indicates a fusion of different cultures, both in religion and architecture. This photo is not Egyptian, but in advanced Roman design. So, can I still see a lot of stoneway work between us and the outside? So there has to be if we're some sort of pyramid. Perhaps it looks like some pyramid on the outside, but I doubt if the Romans would go into the trouble of constructing it of solid stone. I don't think a chamber this side could support the weight if it were so. I mean, it's hollow. There's a good chance that at least the upper part is this, but as you said earlier, we must be empirical about the matter. Let's get a ladder and find out. Two minutes later, sifting several priceless pieces of furniture. Then she suspected that not troubled Cleopatra, who probably had people in it to do her removals. Eventually, the space was made, and she gratefully flopped down on the chased tongue-style couch, uncaring about what the previous owner would have thought of the library. Phew, is it hot or cold in here? I can't tell. The doctor was mopping his brow with a large white handkerchief. It's a trifle enervating, I admit. Possibly the rather dead air in here. The dust doesn't help. Anyway, we must get on. There will be plenty of fresh air outside. And I've gone over 40 pages in, so I'm taking a break, and I will finish this. And I will do some more reading of this book next stream. All right, guys, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. Take care. Peace. Bye for now.